Calling to order the Historic Preservation Board meeting for February 7th, 2023. First item up, roll call.
Nathaniel Courtney.
Here.
Vivian Tyler. She does have an excused absence.
Okay.
Bill Haight.
Here.
Liz Hawk. She also has excused absence. Michelle Hazen. Michael Hill.
Here.
Isaac Kamal. Jay Reeves.
Here.
Bill Warner.
Here.
Bridget Murphy.
Here.
Jeff Corn.
Thank you. Next item up, approval of the minutes from December 6th, 2022.
Move to approve.
I'll second that motion.
Okay. Any comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you. Next item up would be public comment for an item that's not already on our agenda. Is there anyone? Okay,
Well, we have, who made that motion for the minutes?
That was Bill.
Of course. Okay. We do have two items under public comment.
okay,
One of them was going to be the introduction of our new board member, Miss Vivian Filer. Well, when she was appointed to the Historic Preservation Board, she already had a program scheduled at her museum. So she will be here next week. As many of you know, she is one of the founders and director of the Cotton Club Heritage Cultural Museum. And actually what they're doing today is they are hosting the Florida Gator football team over there to give them a little history. So I said, you need to be there.
yeah.
That's where you need to be.
Those meatheads.
And then the other thing on public comment, we do have Sarit Sela, the city architect, who is here to present a conceptual plan that they have been working on for a transition space between downtown and the Pleasant Street neighborhood.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarit Sela. Thank you. So as Kathleen mentioned, this is for information for brainstorming with you. We call it Pleasant Space. It's Pleasant Street. And the project is located on Northwest 2nd Street between University Avenue and Northwest 1st Avenue. Half of that block has been closed for parking and through traffic since the pandemic started, and serving as Flacco's space for outdoor seating and activities. Last December, the City Commission directed us to reopen that street and to provide some space for sidewalk cafe seating. So that's kind of a compromise between the existing and the pre-pandemic conditions. We worked with community members and with the business owners and got into that. Since then, we met with staff, with some of the stakeholders, and came up with some ideas of how to move forward. In the last week, we also went to the city's Arts in Public Places Trust and to the county's Arts Council board. And later this month, we will also go to the GCRA Advisory Board, and seeing you today to bring this to the attention of interested people. So what we are thinking is two-phased project. One, starting with infrastructure. The existing sidewalk on the east side is pretty wide and in good condition, so that will stay as is. The roadway, we're going to narrow it. It will remain a northbound single-lane road like it was before the pandemic. What we're removing is the parking on that block. Mm-hmm. So we can gain a little space for the western side. The street will be more symmetrical, let's say. There have been also issues of stormwater along this block, so Public Works is also working on that. Work has started yesterday, and it's supposed to take 6 weeks. That's the estimate. So it brings us to mid-March. And then the second phase is more of a softer side, public art. We see this as an opportunity to implement one of the ideas that is in the downtown strategic plan that was recently adopted. And that idea is the transition between downtown and the neighboring neighborhoods, historic neighborhoods. So that could be an example of how, you know, we could bring that into life. How can we celebrate the transition and the culture that comes from both areas into that street. It has good visibility from University Avenue. We have pedestrians walking around. We have business activity. It's pretty active around the clock. And we see, and what the illustration on the left, on the bottom, is just an illustration of some of the ideas that we had. One is to have mosaic boards that would be kind of along the base of the state attorney and county building, and it's about like 4 or 5 feet tall to the window sill, and it can celebrate the history of the neighborhood, different activities, and kind of just bring the vibe into a mosaic art. We talked about the idea of a community events board on Flacco's side, something that talks about, you know, what's happening right now, not just in the history. And then either a sculpture or a gateway or something. The thought that we had, you know, talking with the arts council, with the city and the council and the county, is maybe to have like a call for artists and see also what comes back, kind of opening it up to ideas. We also talked about a potential historic marker. I know that kind of the boundary of the historic area is a little to the north, maybe a block or two to the north, but this is very visible and can draw people into the neighborhood and kind of, you know, accompany you as you enter the neighborhood. And that's pretty much all, I think. Yeah. So just
Okay.
wanted to open it for
Any questions or comments from the board?
Yes, sir, Chairman. I do have a question regarding the community events board. What would be the design of the board? Would it just be like, you know, like a glass board that sort of holds like papers where you can post events? Would it be like designed like an LED wall to be able to, you know, flash materials, or like what is the idea behind the community events board? What would it actually look like?
It's a good question. I do not have answers yet. It could be these or a different design.
Okay, so I guess maybe
At this point, it's just an idea.
Okay, so I guess that would turn into a recommendation. I think it would be beneficial for the city to consider maybe utilizing LED walls or LED tiles to create an events board to sort of modernize the city in the downtown area. I think that's a cool aesthetic.
Thank you.
Sure, I have a question. Ms. Sela, to the this is a great design. Now, those mosaic boards that you want to put on the side where the state attorney's office is. Now, what are those? You said those are to contain pieces of history, and you said art. Is that correct? Now, like my question that I'd like to ask, and maybe this was discussed at the other boards that you spoke at. Are we going to get local artists to paint some murals on that, or like what's the project with that or the plan?
What we're thinking is to have the art be the mosaic, so not a mural at this point. We have lots of murals going on around, so that is a little more durable and will be just more unique to that space.
Okay.
Those boards, if that moves forward, that will be owned and led by the county because it's their building. Probably a representative from the city's arts and public places trust would sit and be part of the evaluation process of the artist. They were talking about doing like a call for artists with, you know, just the theme is the history of the neighborhood and see what comes. Maybe with preference for an artist that works with the community, and part of their process would be to work with the community and kind of, you know, what are the big names, what are the big events that we want to celebrate and things like that. The boards can be created off-site and attached to the building. So that also helps with maintenance, and because it's short, there is not a lot of safety liability, like no boards will fall on anyone's head, and lots like that.
Okay, no, thank you so much. Cool.
Okay, anyone else? Comments? Okay, let's open it up to the public.
Dottie Favasi, Pleasant Street resident. I just wanted to thank you all. I know I've been before you before, and you gave me your support and sent it to the city commission, and I'm just so happy the street is being reopened. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Tana Silva, and I want to reiterate that too. The street was closed for no particularly civic purpose. This is one business out of about 3,000 in the city. This is our only, northbound street through the neighborhood. And so I'm glad it's going to be opened again, that most of all. I still will be a little wary because of the way they're reconstructing that part of the street to dig up the bricks and put pavement or whatever. So who knows what the future may hold. I don't understand the city spending so much money on this one half of a block that is not in Pleasant Street. And I don't think there's been any real consultation with the Pleasant Street Historic Society or the neighborhood or the Pleasant Street Neighborhood Association about maybe better uses for the money. They're talking about $30,000 art piece. But, the other thing that's overlooked, and I'm sorry Ms. Feiler isn't here, I'm happy she's going to be on the board. But for years and years, the city has been earmarking, I've seen as high as $1 million for a trail, the Heritage Trail, that some people call the Heritage Trail of Tears because Fifth Avenue neighborhood is destroyed. And that seems like that would be where the markers and all of that need to come from. Dottie just informed me that there is a mural already on that left wall there. Hundreds of times I've gone down that street, I've never even noticed it. It's that, putting artwork there is not going to be visible. It's not part of the neighborhood. The neighborhood begins 2 blocks north. The idea of connecting the neighborhoods, the 5 neighborhoods with downtown comes from the UF downtown plan. And anyway, so those are my thoughts about it. I don't see the city spending a lot more money on that one corner. They're already widening the sidewalk, which wasn't in the original agreement that the city commission made. So I would think, if you want to really do something for the Pleasant Street neighborhood and its historic value, then push a little harder on getting the Heritage Trail and spend the money on something that the community really needs. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay. All right. Thank you, Sarit. We appreciate it, the update. And we'll look forward to seeing more, I hope. Okay. All right. That brings us to the public hearing portion of the meeting. Ms. Kaufman?
If any of you are going to be speaking on behalf of one of the public hearings today, please stand and raise your right hand. Do you affirm that the testimony you're about to give the Historic Preservation Board today is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Very good. We do have 2 requests for deferral.
Okay.
Public hearing 3 and public hearing 4 are two separate parcels, but they're next to each other, so they're kind of coming to you together. It is for new construction, residential construction in Pleasant Street, and I have met with the architect on site, and we've discussed some of the context issues there, and so they're continuing to finesse the design.
Okay, all right, that's good.
I think you need a motion and a second to defer.
Okay, we have a motion, is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, all those in favor of the deferral?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, carries.
So public hearing, this will be public hearing 1. This is COA 22106. The address is 504 Southwest 10th Street. This is in University Heights South. It is a contributing structure. The property appraiser lists it at 1929, but our Florida Master Site File research puts it closer to circa 1912. It does show up on one of the early Sanborn maps, so we know it's at least that early. This is on the southwest corner of Southwest 5th Ave and Southwest 10th Street. It is a wood vernacular building with a front gable, central chimney structure with Dutch lath siding, and it's distinguished by its curved reveal or channel between the installed boards. That's what a Dutch lath siding is. It features unusual window configurations. Its double hung sash windows are one light on the bottom, and the divided lights on the top are in that prairie style pattern, kind of a 9-light configuration. You can see it in the photographs. This is a COA to replace the asphalt shingle roof with a 5V crimp metal roof in Galvalume. Our current design guidelines provide a framework for this board to be able to make informed decisions on a case-by-case basis with the ultimate goal of satisfying the applicant's desired outcome while still maintaining the historic character of the building. These guidelines, however, do recommend that new roofing materials on contributing structures stay consistent with what the roofing material was, either at the time of construction or, if that's not known, to match the existing material. In this case, composition shingle. When this district was surveyed in 1980, the building had shingle at that time. It doesn't mean it didn't originally have metal, but we don't have evidence of that. Additionally, at the July 5th, 2022 Historic Preservation Board meeting, the board took up a special item to discuss this issue of metal roofs in the historic districts. The board voted on a series of colored metal roofs that could be administratively approved by staff as a way to streamline roof permit processing time and to also limit the amount of reflective silver roofing in the historic districts. The applicable standards are as follows. There's actually only one. The rehabilitation guidelines state the existing roof shall be retained or replaced in a manner known to be accurate based on documentation or physical evidence. Those were our guidelines, the city guidelines. And then the Secretary of the Interior's standards for rehabilitation guidelines, the one that applies in this situation is Standard 9. New additions, exterior alterations, or related new construction shall not destroy historic materials that characterize the property. New work shall be differentiated from the old and shall be compatible with the massing size, scale, and architectural features to protect the historic integrity of the property and its environment. The structure was surveyed in 1980 as part of a larger citywide survey of historic structures. At that time, it had a composite shingle roof. Approving the metal roof request in this case would not be an appropriate interpretation of the city's historic preservation, rehabilitation, and design guidelines. Staff recommends that the application be approved with the following conditions. The roof material can be asphalt shingle, as it is existing, or a metal roof in one of the colors pre-approved by the Historic Preservation Board.
Okay. Would the applicant like to speak to the issue?
Thank you. Thank you, Kathleen. Kathleen did a really great job when we met, explaining, hey, this is sort of where we are, and we've to streamline the process, gone to saying, hey, we approve these colors and these raising roofs. And y'all know I periodically come before the board, and I listened to all that and took it in, understand it, I think, fairly well, and yet still want to come to you and say, hey, may I have this? And I think there's good reason to do it, and I understand a lot of the reasoning that allowed y'all to say, hey, this is sort of where we're going with the guidelines, and this is where we're streamlining it. And so I'm happy to sort of address what I think are maybe some of the issues that y'all would have. I'm also happy to hear what issues you do have, and saying, hey, Reed, I don't think this is appropriate. I don't think this is the time to do this here. So, I don't know if you want me to try to tell you some things, or if y'all want to ask me some questions or share concerns. We're talking about, can we have a metal roof? The answer is yes. Does it need to be painted? The answer is to streamline it. Certainly yes. Do we want raised seam roofs? I'm of the opinion that that's not the product I'd like to put there, and I have what I feel like is good reasoning. Y'all have come up with good reasoning as to why we would do raised seam roofs. So, happy to have that conversation. I'd like to persuade y'all in this case on this property to allow for a 5V crimped galvanized roof, which historically we've had quite a bit of in this city and in the University Heights areas. With that, I'm happy to either say more, or if y'all want to ask me why I want this, or I don't. You tell me, Jay. How should we do this?
Well, that would be a very good question. What is specific about the roof you're asking for?
Okay.
That you would like to have for that? What reason?
Okay. So specifically, this house is a historic building that was moved prior to us ever buying it. We own most of that block. My company does, and we have for over 20 years now. We bought about half of it 20 years ago, and we've bought the rest of it, except for 4 lots at this point. So out of, I don't know, 24 lots, we probably own 20. We've done 3 phases of development. One of the things that we're accomplishing there, and it's so apparent now. Jay remembers when I was maybe considered the bad boy of the historic district, but we've come around to being pretty good custodians of what we're a part of. When you see the 10-story building that's going up diagonally across the street from our properties, and you go, wow, and like it or not like it, it definitely makes you go, wow. I personally really love the way our historic properties and our historic district look juxtaposed to that. It's and again, we could all say reasons we like it or don't like it, but one of the things I do love is sort of the quaintness of what we've been doing for the last 20 years. And so I'm more in favor of the historic district and everything that goes along with it now from a perspective of, hey, we're not that. And literally Amy, who runs a number of our companies, she loves that. She loves being able to market. If you want that, you can go have that. We're not that, but we are this. And it's more apparent than ever with what's going up where Campus USA used to be. So with that said, again, we own more than the majority of the block. We almost own the whole block. And we're trying to tie it together in a fabric that's reasonable. You don't want everything to look like vanilla, but you want some vanilla, and you want some sprinkles, and you want some chocolate. You want different things that have gone in our neighborhood. One of the things we've been able to do during our redevelopment is have 5V crimp roofs. And we don't have a ton of it, But the only roofing differences we have on that block, we have some copper on some of the fronts of the buildings. We have 3 different spots, and we own all 3 of those buildings. We have some barrel tile roofs. We have mostly asphalt shingle. We have some 5V crimp on our block and elsewhere in the neighborhood. And we have flat roofs that are rubber up real high that you can't even see. But so trying to mix them all in, for us, it would help us complete a look. We're going to be coming before y'all within the year for our redesign and rebuild of buildings around that building. And those probably won't have a 5V crimp, but this building to me lends itself to it. It looks very much, you described the siding, you described the windows. There's not a ton of awesome architectural features. The 2 that you pointed out were really sort of the best of it. This would be another defining feature that helps set it as an older building. The 5V crimp, especially still up in Pleasant Street, we have it all over the place, and having grown up here, I can tell you, it's been here for more than 45, 50 years. And so I think it kind of grounds it. I understand the concern with Galvalume and hey, how much sunlight is this going to reflect? The reality is the north side of our building has 2 substantial trees. They're both in the city property. They're not going to be taken down. We wind up maintaining a lot of the canopy because it's just more effective for us to do. So when we're in the summer months, there will not be sun hitting on that roof to any great extent because of the 2 trees. We're in the winter months right now. The sun does hit on the southern side of the roof. The reality is that we're going to be building a 2.5-story building there that will fit, and then it will probably even step up to 3 stories. So at that point, that will be in the shade in the wintertime. So the roof won't be getting a ton of sunlight at any time. Galvalume initially does have a lot of reflective materials. As it patinas, it doesn't as much. And there's literally standing there taking pictures of our building. I looked around and I was like, oh, do we have any? I saw a nice barrel tile roof. And I went, oh, look. And up on Stratford Ridge, Trimark's property, there's actually a 5V crimp Galvalume detail. And it's not a ton of roof, and it's up very high. It's not very noticeable, but it is there. So literally on that street, not 100 feet from this building, we already have it, and it's on a property we don't own. We also have it on 2 other spots on Fifth Avenue on front porches that we did as a nice additional detail. So, is it a slippery slope for y'all to approve it here? I don't know. And I would understand y'all saying, gosh, we don't want to do it because it's a slippery slope. I think there's good reasons because, again, the reflection from the sun is mitigated by the trees and by the buildings that are to come. To me, as a personal preference, growing up here, we didn't have a ton of painted metal roofs. So while it does look very nice and can be a good solution for a lot of properties, to me, it's not really the most appropriate historic material. I like the 5V crimp roof. We have a beautiful lake house my family does out at Lake Santa Fe, and it's all 5V crimp. It's all under oak trees. It's dappled with sunlight. It looks really nice. That's a personal preference thing. I don't know. I understand y'all saying, hey, let's try to speed this thing along and give people good options. And so I understand why y'all approved painted colors and even there's some colors there I think I don't like or maybe y'all kept from approving the copper painted color, which I don't like the copper painted color, me personally. But anyway, if we could get an approval here, we're going to do a really nice paint job. It'll probably be a $4 or $5 color paint job on that house. We're going to landscape it even better. Again, we just purchased it this summer, So the chance for us to improve it, and for us, again, we own a fair amount of property on that, to have a corner property that shows nicely, looks nice, represents us well, fits into the rest of what we're doing, but stands out as its own. That's the goal here. To me, the roof I want to do is the nicest roof we could do, that would look appropriate. So, that's what I'm asking for.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
All right. Board discussion?
Yeah, I'll go first here. I think, this is a building of, significantly more than minimal quality. In my opinion, 5E crimp is appropriate to sheds and extremely modest structures, which we find in Pleasant Street and some of the other areas. It certainly doesn't characterize or is predominant in this district. I think it would be a downgrade. It would be conspicuously located, or very conspicuous in its placement, and I'm absolutely opposed to 5E crimp on this structure.
All right. Any other comments?
I guess it's more questions for me. This is really a learning experience right now, so I would kind of defer to some of the experts on the board. I've heard citizens talk about wanting to, I guess, upgrade or change to metal roofs, right? That being a thing that's come up pretty frequently. I understand that traditionally, right, it's not what we've seen in historic districts. I guess I'm trying to understand how we're moving towards metal roofs, and then just wanting to understand, I guess, is it the aesthetics, right, or is it something else that we're trying to get at? Is it something else that we're trying to motivate citizens who are in these areas to sort of follow?
Okay, good questions. All right.
Would you like me to answer that?
You can answer it or I can answer it, whichever.
So I think when this board, I don't think you were on the board just yet when we did this item. It's not about when you have historic buildings, it's really about what's appropriate for the building, not what people want or like. And the reason we took up the metal roof issue to begin with is because there had been a rash of approvals for metal roofs, and it instantly changes the look of the street. You have this very blinding silver, everywhere. However, and it really wasn't done, I mean, it does help expedite some of the permitting process to allow staff to approve some, but that's not the main reason why we tackled that issue. The main reason was to, what you have on the roof historically, or what you know to be on the roof as far back as you can find, is what your federal standards, your Secretary of the Interior standards tell you. That's the preferred roofing thing. However, with the roofing industry being crazy as it is, and people wanting a longer lasting roof, a more durable roof, this preservation board said, okay, we realize people might want an option for a metal roof, but it's not going to be all silver everywhere. So we provided, and copper is not one of them.
Yeah, good. I don't like the copper.
Copper is not one of the approved colors.
I don't like the copper paint.
So they approved a slate of colors, mostly in the earth tone families, grays, the things that are reflective, the kind of typical colors you have on an asphalt shingle roof. You can replicate the patina greens. Those are really pretty. But again, it's not about what I think is pretty or what anyone else thinks is pretty. It's what is the appropriate material for that structure, and what are we supposed to be recommending if we stick to our rules and our guidelines. There are sometimes extenuating circumstances, which is why you see these on a case-by-case basis. This, and he presents a very compelling, story. I provided you photos, context photos of what is also around this building. We don't see any metal roofs around this building. This building is also it's a corner property. So it's not only visible from the front, it's visible from the side. And that's just why staff thinks we should stick to the guidelines that we put in place for allowing people to have a metal roof, but it's going to be a softer muted color from one of the colors on the approved color list.
The other thing I will add is that we also noticed where we were getting the streets, where so many of them were happening, people were starting to have issues with the reflectivity being right into their neighbors. And it is an issue. And that was part of it as well. But the biggest thing was it changes the look of the neighborhood. And that is the underlying issue. And that was what relates back to the Secretary of the Interior standards, maintaining the look and character of the neighborhood.
Wasn't one of the colors sort of a galvalume color, just muted?
Dull
Yeah,
silvers,
the
grays.
grays.
So there are some dull silver.
There are dull colors that work, but not the shiny silver is what we're trying to avoid. And then, as Bill mentioned, the issue with 5E crimp, because the 5E crimp has its own kind of look to it, which is typically more coastal, or in this town, historically, it was, as he pointed out, it was the lesser buildings, not the nicer buildings. And that's just, the way we've chosen to address it, to reach a compromise with everybody to allow for metal roofs, because we know the industry is pushing for it. People want longer roofs. Insurance companies are a whole nother story. But anyway, that's why we're going for something that is not shingle, but looks and has the character of a shingle roof. It doesn't really stand out as, look at me, I'm different. So that's just the background.
Great question.
If I may add to the history on that, about 20 years ago, the insurance industry started trying to drive everybody toward metal roofs. They didn't give a damn about the aesthetics or what the differentiation. Of course, in today's market, now they're saying a roof's a roof's a roof. They don't care if it's metal or done 20 years ago that whoever was given a lifetime guarantee or would have the likelihood of lasting 100 years, as some have. But there is a fundamentally distinct difference between a shed character of roof and a finished, a more finished, in our case, available today, a standing seam or those roof types and characters that we have approved and that are in the guidelines. So in this context, in this setting, 5E crimp is, in my opinion, totally inappropriate.
If I may, because as y'all spoke, I remembered a couple of things so I kind of just want to correct them. I don't think the material, but I misspoke because we have some interest fiber roofs. I don't know. We still have 3 or 4 of them on that block that we own, and then Bill, I get what you're saying, and in many ways I agree with it. In terms of the presentation of the house and whether a shed roof or a 5E crimp roof would be appropriate. The only place I differ, and again, when you look at history, we didn't have standing seam painted roofs 50 years ago, 80 years ago. That wasn't a product. I mean, what we're approving didn't exist, and what I'm asking for did. And that's, that's the only, again, we all have different interpretations of how historic districts should go. But that's one of those things where I look at it and I say, so we're gonna continue to approve painted standing seam roofs that didn't exist and have some good qualities, some lesser qualities, versus a material that did exist and was used in the area. And I'll concede that it probably more often than not was for a less substantial house than a more substantial house. And I picture this one as not as substantial, but I guess maybe it's because we have so many other that are sort of prettier. To me, it makes me go, okay, well, God, I mean, do I just need to put a asphalt shingle roof on there, which I can. The pitch of the roof isn't awesome. Y'all could tell me you're better at that, but it would hold up fine. I mean, maybe that's what I do. I truly, and even to your point, you said, oh, it's more of a coastal thing. I picture sort of more of a coastal look with this house as I complete it. And so, maybe that's part of what was leading me. And so maybe I need to dial that back. We've all had plenty of good dialogue back and forth here. I'd still like to be able to do it. Thank you, Bill. Yeah.
One other comment. I mean, to me, putting 5E crimp on a house like this would be totally out of character with the character of work that you have done so much of in the neighborhood. You have an excellent history.
Yeah.
So I think applying 5E crimp here would be inconsistent with the quality of work that you have typically done.
Thank you.
So, Bill, I know that you're opposed to the metal roof. I guess from my understanding, what would be an appropriate alternative to what Mr. Fogel is proposing, like from a metal perspective? Like, what would be okay? I know you're opposed to it, but what would?
Well, it's the character and the history of 5E crimp. It's a shed roof. It is the cheapest form of metal roof there is out there. For that reason, it was used on extremely modest structures.
Or utilitarian structures.
Just utility sheds, literally. Standing seam was not common in residential use then. It did exist, but was not common. It is, if you want to have a metal roof today, it should at least be of a quality of character that is appropriate to the structure you're going to put it on. This is a pretty decent residential structure, and it would be, I think, a negative to put 5E crimp shed roofing on a structure of this quality.
But you do agree that I can find plenty of and a lot of them are coastal, but plenty of $500,000, $600,000, $1 million houses that have 5E crimp on them.
That is, at the coast, we know that.
Was it? Yeah.
At the coast, we know that, but let me just say, we're not here to debate the roof today.
Yeah.
Roofing. We've done that.
Okay.
What we need to do is move on with this item because we have many more we need to address.
Okay. Well, then I'd ask you to vote. Go ahead and vote, and we'll see how that goes. Thank you.
Okay. All right.
I'll move to approve COA 22-106 with staff recommendations.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second, any further discussion? Any public comment?
You want me to roll call?
Yes, please.
Daniel Courtney?
Aye.
Phil Haight?
Aye.
Michael Hill?
Aye.
Jay Reeves?
Aye.
Bill Warner?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay.
Reed, you understand that the motion gives you the choice. Gives you a choice of the asphalt shingle or the metal.
The standing seam.
Correct.
Correct.
With the staff recommendation.
Sorry?
That was with the staff recommendation.
Yes.
Correct. Thank you.
Yep, with the staff recommendation.
Okay, public, sorry, are you ready for public hearing?
Yes,
Okay.
public hearing 2.
Public hearing 2 is COA 22-106. This is at 305 Northeast 6th Avenue. This is in the Northeast Historic District, also known as the Duck Pond, a contributing structure. Florida Master Site File dates this circa 1913, but we believe it to be even earlier. This is on the southeast corner of Northeast 3rd Street and Northeast 6th Avenue. The building is a spectacular early wood frame structure with a full-length front porch, hip with cross gable roof, and cedar shake siding. It is a vernacular bungalow version of the shingle style that was made popular by the McKim, Mead & White and Peabody and Stearns architectural firms in the 1880s. The COA application is for adding a second floor balcony to the rear and east side of the building. The second floor balcony is comprised of simple posts with horizontal cable wires. The balcony is supported by 6x6 posts with boxed, smooth, hardy panel boards to match the existing front columns on the house. And these columns are on bases. The bases are also proposed to be wrapped in the cedar shake so that it matches the bases that are on the front porch columns. One of the windows on the side of the second floor will be turned into a door for access to the balcony. This custom door will have trim that matches the existing historic windows. So our current design guidelines, our guidelines do provide a framework for the board to be able to make informed decisions on a case-by-case basis with the ultimate goal of satisfying the applicant's desired outcome while still maintaining the historic character of the building. And our rehabilitation guidelines state, additions to historic buildings are often required to make projects economically feasible, to satisfy fire and building code requirements, to house mechanical systems, and for other personal or practical reasons. This owner is a Gainesville native, and she's lived in the Duck Pond neighborhood since 1998. In 2003, she was able to secure the upstairs apartment at this property. She and her father then spent their life savings restoring the house, including regaining possession of the downstairs apartment from the previous tenants who had let that unit become disastrously run down. The owner takes a medication to suppress her immune system and is not allowed to be around people. In addition to that, she is battling Crohn's disease. She cannot leave her house. Oftentimes, she can't even leave the upstairs apartment. The addition of a balcony will give her the opportunity to enjoy the sunshine and just to have time outdoors. And these are the applicable standards. The Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation are to be applied to rehabilitation projects in a reasonable manner, taking into consideration the economic and technical feasibility. So Standard 9 is about new additions. The new additions and exterior alterations shall not destroy historic materials that characterize the property. The new work shall be differentiated from the old and shall be compatible with the massing, size, scale, and architectural features to protect the historic integrity of the property and its environment. So this balcony has been designed to pick up some of those features that you see on the historic house, but clearly it's going to be differentiated as a modern balcony with the use of the cable wire railing. There is an existing screen porch to the rear corner of the house. That will remain. This new balcony will be over that. And the balcony does not run along the entire side of the house. It starts about halfway back. It doesn't even come as far as all the windows come forward on the side of the house. It extends back to the back of the covered porch a little bit, about 2 feet past that covered porch. The majority of the materials, including paint colors and siding, have been selected to match the historic property. However, the actual balcony will be differentiated as a new addition. The use of that cable will also minimize the visual impacts to the house, as it's mostly a see-through material. Standard 10 is about new additions and adjacent or related new construction. These shall be undertaken in such a manner that if removed in the future, the essential form and integrity of the historic property and its environment would be unimpaired. Well, the addition of this balcony on half of one side of the house does not, ruin the essential form and integrity of this historic house to begin with. The construction has been designed to avoid disruption of the existing fenestration, with the exception of the one window that is being turned into a door for access. This whole feature could theoretically be removed in the future, and the essential form and integrity of the historic property would remain unimpaired. Now, as you all know, this property, it's right across the street from the Thomas Center. It's right in the heart of the historic district. It's one of the well-known houses, super historic. They were gonna put this balcony all along the back side of the house. The back side of the house, she would have been basically looking at the metal roof of her garage. So they switched the design to come a little bit around the corner and come up this side of the house, not the side that faces the street, because this is a corner property. So they're proposing to put this balcony on the side that faces another house. And they worked, she is adamant about wanting to do right by this house and restore it in every way possible. So she had the architect work really diligently to try to just make it as least impactful visually as possible.
Okay.
Okay.
She obviously cannot be here, but she does have a representative here if you have any questions.
Okay, let's have the representative speak. Oh, James.
Hey everybody, James Blythe. I was not involved in this as an architect, but rather just as kind of a neighbor in the community, so I'm here to help answer questions if there's any.
Okay, I've got one. You may not know the answer to this, but what is the decking material? Because this shows it as being 3/4 inch material, and I can't quite picture what that would be.
3/4 inch decking.
It shows up on the section on the upper part, pointing right beside on the.
I'm not
left-hand
sure
side.
what the material would be. I do know that the porch, I believe, has a existing kind of painted decking,
Yeah,
so I would imagine it would be consistent.
I would say it's probably not going to be for an open balcony.
No, it's definitely could not be the way this is framed, because the rake of the original wood deck would have joists running at 16 inches horizontal, parallel to the exterior wall, not at a right angle. So to me, structurally, would certainly need to be more than 3/4 inch and open,
Yeah,
because
to drain the
it
water.
wouldn't shed.
Right, and I should have clarified, probably not painted, more material width size. I do not know what the material is.
Okay,
or what
that's
it will be
something we
finished
can
with.
direct Kathleen to find that out. Just because I'm concerned, and, one of my concerns is it is synthetic deck, but it's not thick enough. And I know from experience, you don't want to put 3/4 tongue and groove up there, because that won't last any time. Yeah, okay. That's the only question I have. Anybody else have questions?
I just will make the comment that when I first looked at our package, I was really not of a initial reaction was not positive. However, the more I've thought about it, I think the most part care has been taken to avoid damaging the fabric of the original structure, and a subsequent owner could easily remove that, restore the original condition. I do, whereas the wire rail at 4 inches presumably is something very different for the neighborhood. I think it's appropriate to this application for the reasons stated, that it is as close to not even there visually as it could be.
Yeah, because a normal balustrade, which we'd see the 2x2s, 5 inches on center or something like that, number one, it's not going to last out there exposed, and number two, you paint that, it calls attention to the balcony. So based on reading the staff report, I agree, even though this is an unusual situation, I probably wouldn't agree if it was on the front of the building, but being where it is, I think probably it will make it less noticeable. The other thing I will point out to everybody is where this is attached to the building, that whole section of the shed dormer across there is all additions to the house anyway. So that side has already been changed over time.
That little enclosed porch on the ground floor.
Well, I think that's probably an addition as well. That whole shed dormer across the back is all additions. Yeah. Okay, is there more comments? Anybody want to venture a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve COA A22, 106 with staff recommendations and a clarification of the decking material.
I will second that motion.
Okay,
Let me do roll call.
probably not necessary for this one. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We're good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, remember, public hearings 3 and 4 have been deferred.
Okay.
So we'll move on to public hearing 5.
All right.
This is COA 23002. The address is 313 Northwest 8th Avenue, and this is Pleasant Street Historic District. It is the edge of Pleasant Street. Northwest 8th Avenue is one of the boundaries. And this is a circa 1913 structure. It does have a Florida Master Site File, and it's owned by Pleasant Street Historical Society. It's a modest one-story wood frame vernacular structure. Features a side gable roof with a full-length, partially enclosed porch that has a shed roof. The structure's foundation includes both brick and concrete piers. A simple 5V crimp metal roof contains exposed rafter beams underneath the eaves. The front enclosed porch is punctuated by a central entryway, currently covered with a clamshell awning. The porch is clad with vertical boards, while the remaining structure, is clad with simple horizontal shiplap siding.
Go on.
This is a COA for the demolition of the structure. The application indicates that at some point, the parcel will be developed for parking to support the property that's to the west, a building also owned by the Historical Society, and they hope to turn that into a museum. Pleasant Street Historic District has special criteria that's different from your regular demolition criteria that the board must use when considering demolition applications. This is all spelled out in your historic preservation ordinance. This is because Pleasant Street has seen more demolitions and new construction infill that has eroded the historic building stock more than any other designated historic neighborhood. Rising property values are overriding the ability for these small vernacular structures to be preserved and a significant Gainesville African American neighborhood was and still is at risk for significant loss. The special criteria for reviewing demolition requests is found in section 30-4.28 of the Historic Preservation Ordinance. So when you're considering a demolition in Pleasant Street, these are the criteria you have to look at. The first thing is the significance of the property. And a property shall be considered to be significant if it meets one of the following criteria. 1, the property is located on an important street and within a cluster of historic buildings. Cluster is defined by the presence of 3 historic buildings adjacent to each other on the same block as the property proposed for demolition, either on the same side of the street, across the street, or on adjacent side streets of the block. And then that paragraph goes on to define the important streets. 2, the property is located on one of those important streets or within a cluster of historic buildings and meets one of the following criteria. It maintains its basic plan and additions, if any, were made in non-prominent elevations and porches were not enclosed. Its features are unique and there are few remaining occupied buildings of its type in the neighborhood. And 3, it is associated with an important person based on original ownership documentation contained in the nomination of Pleasant Street to the National Register of Historic Places. So for that criteria too, it has to meet one of those sub-criteria in that paragraph. 3, the property is not on an important street and not within a cluster of historic buildings, but it has been evaluated for its architectural quality and structural condition and merits preservation. That was all under A. That was all under significance of property for what you're supposed to look at for significance. And now B, plans for redevelopment. Demolition of historic buildings without definitive plans for redevelopment is discouraged. And I would say especially parking lots. We never want to see historic buildings go away for just parking. This factor evaluates the proposed reuse of the property if the proposed demolition is carried out and what the effect of those plans on the character of the surrounding area would be. C, and C is the last criteria for demolition in Pleasant Street, is the condition of the building. The Historic Preservation Board will evaluate the structural integrity, weather tightness, and the economic feasibility of rehabilitation based on the condition of the roof, foundation, and walls, as well as the cost of replicating features and details on the historic building in any proposal for new development, and will determine if reasonable measures can be taken to save the building, structure, or object from collapse. So here's the assessment. Here's staff's assessment on those criteria. Criteria A, for significance of property. Well, we know A1, it doesn't qualify. The property is not located on one of those specified streets that was listed out. For A2, the porch was enclosed. However, there are currently few remaining occupied buildings of its type in the neighborhood. This property is also associated with an important person based on original ownership documentation contained in the nomination of Pleasant Street to the National Register of Historic Places. And this was part of a group of properties, 321, which is the 2-story building right next door to this, which the Historical Society wants to eventually turn into a museum. That was the George Smith house. This house at 313 was his brother's, known as Uncle Jim. And so criterion 3, the property's structural condition is poor. We can clearly see that in the photographs. But it does have architectural quality as an early example of these wood frame vernacular structures. So this could be a case for preservation because we have so few of this kind of wood vernacular structure left. I think it's important to say here, you know, architectural quality doesn't necessarily mean it has to be a humongous, stunning house. Architectural quality means that it is representative, you know, of a particular style, even a vernacular, which is not really any style, but it's representative of a building that represents the time and place in which it was built. Criterion B are plans for redevelopment. There are no definitive plans other than the future use as a parking lot. Criterion C, the condition of the building. Obviously, the condition of this building is severely compromised. I mean, nobody's trying to say that it is not in bad condition. However, as part of this application, there's been no structural reports, architectural assessments, or cost estimates for the repairs that were provided and as requested in those special criteria. Clarnell Smith Griffin bequeathed her house, the one next door, at 321 Northwest 8th Avenue and the adjoining property to the Pleasant Street Historical Society in 2003. With the goal of creating a museum highlighting the contributions of the African American citizens of Gainesville and Alachua County. That was the house, that two-story house is the house Clarinella grew up in, 321 Northwest 8th Avenue. That house was built circa 1888 by her grandfather, George Smith, a merchant who emigrated from Camden, South Carolina. In a 1985 oral interview with Clarinell Smith, she mentions the home next door belonging to Uncle Jim and talks about how often he would go hunting in the neighborhood where the cemetery is now, but back then it was all wooded lots. This information came from the Pleasant Street Historic District National Register nomination and an oral history interview currently housed in UF's digital collections and available online. Based on this information, the application, which asserted that the structure has no architectural significance and no significance to the adjacent structure, is unsubstantiated. Staff evaluation. The front portion of the structure was either a full-length porch that was partially enclosed on either end or a later addition entirely. If you look at the photographs, you can see that the foundation supports underneath the porch are concrete block. And then in the rear portion of the house, it's brick piers. The siding is also different between the front porch and the rest of the structure. The front has vertical boards, and the rest of the structure's original horizontal shiplap appears to have been at one point covered up with the newer siding, and now that siding is falling off, exposing the original shiplap underneath. An architectural assessment by a qualified preservation professional should probably review this structure from the inside to determine the various phases of construction and could possibly determine what portion of that building is the original structure. And it's possible it's a much smaller portion than exists today. So staff recommends that the application for the demolition of 313 Northwest 8th Avenue be approved, but with the following conditions. That demolition will be limited to the front porch feature. It's lost its integrity. It's been partially enclosed. We don't know if it was a later addition altogether. So that would be the part that you would be approving removal of. Condition 2, an architectural assessment by a qualified preservation professional shall be done to determine construction phases of the property and shall provide recommendations on what portions should be preserved based on historic merit. Condition 3, consideration shall be taken by the Pleasant Street Historical Society to utilize a portion of this historic building as part of the future museum's site interpretation, since the building was associated with the George Smith home. Relocation on the property shall be allowed once actual site plans have been drafted for future development of the site. The relocation of the structure or portion of the structure shall come back to the Historic Preservation Board for final approval. And I provide that condition as a way for them to understand, like, I don't think we are not sensitive to the fact that if that is a museum, they would need parking there. But since there are no plans right now in front of us for either site interpretation or actual, renovation of the two-story structure, I think it's really premature to just approve a total demolition when we don't really know what piece of this building might have been Uncle Jim's original structure, and could that original piece end up being saved if it were moved to another part of the lot. That's my staff report.
Okay, thank you. Is there someone from the Pleasant Street Historical Group? Okay.
Good evening. I'm Dale Harris, current president of the Pleasant Street Historical Society, a fourth-generation Gainesville native of Pleasant Street. Along with me is Dr. Carolyn Cosby Edwards, who's also a fourth generation, or maybe five, given she is a blood relative of the late Clarendelle Smith Griffin. So, one of the comments I have, it appears that you're a little bit focused on the fact that we can only tear down a part. Also, it doesn't necessarily mean it's just going to be a parking lot. Now that you've given us some direction of where we can go and what we can do, maybe we can do something similar to what Aquin Jones Museum. Make it an outside area where we congregate and meet. I know they have jazz concerts and poetry and a lot of other things. Carolyn is a national storyteller person. Maybe we'll set up that part of that so we can have outdoor activities when the weather permits. So I would like to strike out that it's only going to be a parking lot.
I was only going by what was in the submitted application.
Right, but now you've given us a little
Sure.
curve here. We can tweak and maybe do something that's comparable for both of us.
Sure. I can totally see her on the, giving your storytelling from a recreated porch on that little structure. Really nice.
So that's just an idea that came up. Can you clarify a little bit more about, of course, Uncle Jim is gone, and even though Carol and I are over 70, we didn't know Uncle Jim either. So probably there's no one living can tell us what part he lived in, but could you clarify a little bit more what we could tear down and what we would have to keep and where we would have to move it to?
So this recommendation is kind of just the first.
Okay. Okay.
It's saying, well, and they're the ones that are going to have to approve it. But
Correct.
But my recommendation was saying that the current front porch is obviously compromised. It's been enclosed. I don't even know if it's original. It has different foundation piers from the rest of the building. So you could take that off immediately. My second suggestion, though, would be to have a preservation architect just go through the building, because some of that may also be another addition that you don't need. If you want to save the whole rest of it, great. But there might be a piece of that building that's, because when you look at building materials and construction methods, there's ways to tell if other pieces of the building were added on at a later date. So really what you might end up really wanting to save is a much smaller piece.
We could take a brick and put it in a new building. Okay, it's been done. I've lived in Pleasant Street. I know how many little things go so that something else can be done. I'm willing to work out something. I would like to see the entire building demolished so we can move after many, many years with our dream of making this a museum. But at this point, are you willing to let us just get started with the demolition? Board, yes.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes.
I think what the staff is trying to communicate is the information before us is incomplete, It is not that we are categorically opposed to achieving your objective. It's just that we don't have sufficient information to make a decision as to complete demolition.
Correct. So at this point, is the Preservation Board willing to let us start tearing down the recommended part that she presented?
We'll have to vote on it to find out. So,
Anything, Carolyn, you want to add to this?
Mr. Chair, okay, you want to add?
yes.
I just have a question. So, and this kind of goes both for the applicant and for our preservation officer. Now, if this property, and I've seen the Smith Griffin House multiple times walking the Pleasant Street neighborhood, it's a beautiful home. Now, if this property and the adjacent property are going to be turned into a museum someday, my two questions is this. Since the city of Gainesville is a certified local government, and because of that, we're able to take part in the special categories grants and everything else that our SHPO office in Tallahassee, SHPO's and his state historic office, is able to grant us. Could the city of Gainesville possibly, maybe, and again, this is a long shot when I ask this, could the city of Gainesville possibly strike a public-private partnership with this and saving this home, and also making sure that people of Pleasant Street get their parking lot for their museum? Because, you know, my personal opinion, Pleasant Street is in the heart of Gainesville, and it's the very fabric of this community, and so it's our obligation to help them, in my opinion. That's all I want to ask.
Yes, you may.
So I think certainly anything in Pleasant Street and anything related, any resource like this that clearly has documentation as to what family this used to belong to, and it helps significantly when you're going for grants. And they are a nonprofit, so they could work with the city, you know, to go after some of these grants. The National Trust for Historic Preservation is really on a tear right now, a good tear, to really try to fund sites and objects and places that are significant in African American history. They have a special funding set aside for that. And so, yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
But the but there is that you can't go for these grants without having a solid plan
Yeah, absolutely.
of what you want to do. And almost all of them require some kind of architectural assessment as part of that application.
Okay. No, so good. So basically, what I'm hearing, Ms. Kaufman, is that if the nonprofit was to seek a public-private partnership, it is feasible.
It can be. I can't speak on behalf of the city's decision.
Yeah.
That would be a commission decision.
Of course.
But yes, it's totally possible.
Like,
and it's been done.
And actually, the CRA has participated in the Smith Griffin.
So yeah, I mean, just to say, I'll say my last point, and I'll let Bill speak. You know, what we have here, if they want to tear down a small piece because it's like you can't restore it at all, I will support that. However, though, I would love to talk to the nonprofit further on possible restoration and anything that we can get this done. Heck, and I'll come there this week. I'll come there this weekend if you need help. So I'll lend some sweat equity if I have to. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
No problem.
Okay.
One of the opportunities before you is to continue this, and I respectfully disagree that we ought to just go ahead and get that porch off without a real assessment of what's there. It's when you get into it, is when you begin to find out what is really there. It may very well be that it is beyond practical restoration. We don't know because the work hasn't been done. If you were to come back to us with a plan based on an assessment, we could then act to have you proceed with your objective.
Yes.
I would just sort of add to what Michael is saying, as well as Bill. For me, because it is a historic structure, and because you have the potential plans to turn the, I guess the main structure into a museum. For me, I'm always looking at buildings like this, if we can preserve them, right? And I think that's what we're saying, right? So there needs to be an assessment to see to what extent this building can be preserved, if at all. And then looking at how that building can be utilized as a part of the museum, right? So even if it's, so for example, serving as a library or serving as a research center, if possible. So I think for me, I would just love to see that information turnkey so that we can make, you know, the proper decision. I even think about Uncle Jim, right? Like as a historian, I wonder what his story is. I wonder, does he have a story? Has that story been told? And to what extent is it significant Gainesville history? I agree, like I'm not categorically opposed to voting for the demolition if the assessment says that it's not feasible to save it. I would be all for it, but again, I would just sort of speak to the historical society to think about ways to potentially utilize this building if it could be saved.
Yeah, I just want to say as a descendant, as a relative, as a storyteller, and as a resident down the street since the 1880s, our house, you know, was there and built at the same time, and it went through many changes from basically a shack to a two-story house, and so I know a little bit about the history of what happens, but I just was struck to stand up when you mentioned Jim's story. The story is the person, and the stories of the people, and that's one of the reasons I've come back to Gainesville and to Pleasant Street to try to codify in some form, print, visual, or whatever, the stories of our portion of Pleasant Street. And I just think Jim and, you know, and my grandparents would say, you know, this piece of structure, it's not a building, it's a rubble. And unless we have the funds, which we don't, to restore it to its original stature, it's better to tell Jim's story through reenactment and as a portion of the museum than to keep a broken down piece of architecture unless we were able to totally recreate it. And I don't know that that's feasible. I mean, maybe some of these grants, you know, will do that in 20 years, but I doubt it. And I just want to say that it's not the building, and I understand that your purpose, your mission is historical preservation primarily of buildings. And, you know, that's what we have. You know, Jim is long gone. But I just want to think that sometimes preserving the building is not preserving the story. So I just wanted to make that point.
Thank you.
Okay, is there anybody else from the public that would like to speak to this? Okay. Well, Kathleen.
Hello, I'm Kathleen Pagan. I'm speaking as a member of the public. I have been part of the Pleasant Street Historical Society for 6 years. And it's really been a struggle to fundraise. Of course, several of those were during the pandemic. The annual banquet that I attended several years was always a great event, nice speakers, community awards. We had planned one to occur in late March 2020, and the late Patricia Hilliard Nunn was to be the speaker. Of course, that was canceled. God rest her soul. As a planner, I have thought the museum will need parking. We cannot rely on on-street parking at the corner. The immediately adjacent uses, we couldn't park at GPD. You know, maybe after hours, the floral business would allow some parking, but there is a need for parking. So I haven't been in the building under discussion. I have been in the Clarendell Smith Griffin House, which itself is going to require a lot of work. So my question is, perhaps if the board would consider if an architectural assessment of the materials was done in the building under discussion, maybe some of those could be used in the restoration of the larger house to be the museum. I also argued when we first started meeting again after the pandemic that we do need outdoor spaces. You know, moving ahead, people still want to be outdoors, and there's lots of programming that can happen, or interpretation. Maybe, you know, walls from the existing building under discussion could be salvaged. And I will say, I once wrote a letter when I lived in the Turkish section of Cyprus, and a Lusignan cathedral was literally just crumbling. I wrote a letter to the newspaper, try to use sandbags. And I did experience a 6.4 earthquake that hit off the coast of Paphos, Greek Cyprus. The sea buffered the island, and my experience was looking out a 4th floor balcony and seeing the horizon shift. So lots of challenges, but well-built, well-maintained buildings are critical for public safety. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just add one more comment? For me, this is really interesting because obviously I haven't had much experience on this board, but I remember a few months ago there was a case for demolition in Pleasant Street, and for me, there was sort of an opposite motivation from what is trying to happen here. So I respect that it seems to be right, like you want to be able to get this building demolished so that's done and out of the way and start the parking. I guess what I worry about from the board's perspective and the community's perspective is that if we're quick to give an okay to demolish something, especially in Pleasant Street, then I just wonder how easy it will be for developers who don't have the positive motivations you all have to come in, apply for certificates of demolition. No, that's my point, and that's why I'm on the board, right? And one of the reasons why I wanted to join after speaking with community members, right? Like, those are some of the things that I work to combat. And obviously this is a different sort of case, but again, on paper, it's difficult to say that this is a different sort of case. So for me, I think, again, if there are ways that the community can help to fundraise, to help pay for the feasibility studies, to determine what can be saved, if not, right? Like I get the income thing and I respect that. For me, I would like to get involved and see if there are ways that we can help Pleasant Street Historic District get it done the right way, right? Because I think what the board is saying is once those feasibility studies are conducted, once the actual plan for the museum has been developed on paper, right, and presented, then it's easier for us to sort of make, I guess, I think it would be easier for us to make more favorable decisions for Pleasant Street Historic District. And I think that's kind of what Bill was trying to communicate, and that's not to speak for you. But I think just if the board saw the plan for the museum, if it was just, fleshed out, I think if that feasibility was, the feasibility study was conducted, however we have to make that happen as a community, we can work together to get that done. I think you all would be a lot closer to the results that you want to see.
Okay, Bill.
Oh, I agree with you. I was just going to agree with them. I remember that house, and that house was in very, very bad condition, and it was a danger to the neighborhood. I can't tell if this house is in a similar situation from these pictures. I don't know what the inside looks like.
Right.
And there may be somebody out there that wants this house, that could save this house and do something with this house. And I think it's interesting that a house previous to that I felt was a danger to the neighborhood and not architecturally sound, there was such a community outcry to save it. Whereas this house seems, I don't know that what condition, if it can or cannot be saved by the pictures that are presented to me.
So I want to bring up something a little different. Would you be willing to save it by moving it somewhere else?
I think that's a great idea. I think there may
Because
be
it's
somebody
on
out there.
bricks.
Right. I
I'm
think-
just throwing that out. The second thing, and I'm done for the night. I don't want to be here looking at you guys a year from now. You know, I don't want to come back next month if we jumped through loop 1, and then there's 2 and 3 and 4. So whatever we need to do, I would like to see that written up. We address it as best we can so we can please move on. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Dottie.
Dottie Faberstein. Even though we didn't have all the information that we should have had in our packet, I think this has been helpful for us to have a direction to go in. And like you were just saying, if we had our plans for the museum, it would make it easier to, you know. So I think, all in all, I think this has been helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
I can see Miss Griffin rolling over in her grave at this moment to think that her uncle's house is being considered for demolition. I spent a lot of time with Mrs. Griffin. We had a connection because we have the same birth date, not the year, but the same day and month. And so we had a real connection there. And she and I began talking about a museum, I guess in the late 90s. And I made arrangements and hired an attorney to draw up the plans. And we talked briefly about her uncle's house, and we thought that that might be a place for a caretaker, or perhaps some place where some archives could be placed to have revolving shows at the museum, which is supposed to be a living house museum. She and I spent time in the house, and we spent time at Friendship Baptist Church drawing up a chart of the whole neighborhood, how it used to be when she grew up, who lived where the businesses were, where the Players Shoe Shop was. The businesses were all on 2nd Street, which is Pleasant Street. And I just think that thinking about her, and I certainly don't have the time that Carolyn and Dale have spent in the neighborhood, although I've been there for 35 years. It doesn't seem that long, but I think that I think you had a really good assessment of the property, and I appreciate that. And I think that she would appreciate something being done. I haven't looked at the house a lot. I tried to go in it last week. I happened to see the sign walking one of my dogs past it on 8th Avenue and talked to Dottie briefly after that to find out what was going on. And then looked at the property. There's plenty of room in the back of the house for from an entryway on 4th Street for a parking lot. I look at the parking lot at the museum on I think it's on 7th Avenue in 5th Avenue area. And there isn't a large parking lot there, and I don't see that. That's a fairly large lot there where the house is. It's real deep. And the entry from Mrs. Griffin's back property, the main house, could fill in as a parking lot behind her uncle's house. So Anyway,
Could you
I
just
didn't
give
raise
your-
my hand when I was given was given when you were.
No, it's okay, but could you just state your name for the record?
Me to
please?
take an oath, but anyway.
Could you just give us your name for the record?
Pardon me?
Your name for the record. Give your name to the mic for the.
Oh, George Tedford.
Thank you, George. Okay. All right, anybody else from the public? All right, comments from the board or motions?
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yes.
I will motion to continue this item
Okay.
with the emphasis on that, if I can request the applicant please come back with an architectural analysis of the property, because like, again, we don't know if this thing's about to fall in itself, or that maybe it just needs a few upgrades here and there. So, I said, I'm not gonna go the hasty route and say no and say and deny the permit, I'm just going to motion to continue it, and that's my motion.
Second.
Okay. Any further comment?
Yeah, I would just really quickly, I guess, was that, you already made a motion?
You already made a motion, yeah. All right, Kathleen, why don't you do a roll call on this?
Nathaniel Courtney.
Nay?
He said nay.
I know. Bill Haight.
So to clarify, we are voting.
This is a motion to continue the item so that they have time to do an architectural assessment and come back to the board.
Aye.
Michael Hill.
Aye.
Jay Reeves.
Aye.
Bill Warner.
Aye.
Your motion carries 4-1.
So basically, we made the motion to continue.
Okay.
We don't know what the inside of the house is.
Thank you all, and you understand that it's still active. All you need to do is just, we need to find out what the inside looks like and make a determination based on that.
We were, his recommendation.
And how do we go
They were
about
allowed
making
to
sure
start
we have someone
just doing the
certified?
roofs, I mean, the
Porch,
I can help you with that.
Speak to Kathleen about that.
not at the moment, no.
So quick question, so just for clarity, I'm just getting understanding. So now, well, with the original recommendation, they would have been able to start removing the.
Just the
porch,
front porch.
Correct?
That's all it would have
And
given
it
them.
got you. And in the recommendation, it was already suggested that they get the study done,
Right.
right? So we just essentially, this is a question, I guess, we just essentially brought them back. We're bringing them back again, which they said that they requested not to do. I mean, they were gonna have to come back.
Well, they're gonna come back with the information we need to decide to keep it or let it go.
Yeah.
I got you, but essentially, so then does that change? But that will probably change your recommendation when we vote, or the staff
Yeah,
recommendation, right?
depending on what an assessment shows of if that building is salvageable or not.
I got you. I just, to me, it seems like we just created an extra step for them. And I guess.
Yeah, we have.
We did, right? Because that was a part, everything that was in the motion was already in the staff recommendation, so.
It was, well, the assessment was part of the original recommendation, and it still is in the new one, but it's a motion to continue, so that there's no demolition of anything, because Bill and some other board members were not so sure they wanted to demolish the front porch part.
Okay, thank you.
Well, also, if we went ahead and had approved it, then they'd have to make a whole new motion based on whatever the report said.
Yeah.
I mean, a whole new application.
Right.
This keeps you from having to do that.
Yeah, if I may, I mean, you don't get partially into a demolition or just get a permit to tear your porch off, because it's really hard to find a place to stop. And if the porch is off, then it could be costly to secure the remaining structure.
Right.
Which is not doing them a favor in
Right, it's
achieving
not
the
helping.
objective.
Yeah.
So if we have the more complete information before us, we can make a decision that will let them go forward in an orderly way.
Okay. All right. Is that it for public hearings?
That is.
That's the only reason why I voted in. I thought it was creating extra.
I understand.
There are just 3 items for board business,
Okay,
Business of the board.
but maybe we'll just wait a second.
yeah,
to-
yeah.
Okay, the first item on board business is that you were mailed your preservation in the news packet. If you didn't get it, I'm happy to resend it to you. But one of the articles in there was about, Old Mount Carmel. We did receive a nice sized grant from the National Trust for Historic Preservation, $200,000 for the new roof. So once the building is watertight, then we can move on and Pastor Duncan and University of Florida, they are both still working really hard on additional grants.
Just as long as it's not a metal roof.
We should slide 5 feet crimp up there.
Oh my.
Keep it serious.
Your second item of interest was the CLG annual report. This was uploaded online. I don't think it actually got emailed to you yet because we were waiting on a couple of pieces of information from board members, but it will be emailed to you tonight. But this is a letter from the Florida Department of State, basically saying that they reviewed our report from last year and that we are in good standing, good CLGs. So we continue to be a certified local government.
Awesome.
And being a certified local government is really a fantastic thing to do if you're gonna have a historic preservation program as part of your city. Because this allows you to apply for small matching grants and you don't have to match. So you get to apply for a special pot of money just for CLG and the networking and the availability, the ability to network with all the other historic preservation officers in that network is really invaluable to me, and therefore to you. The last item, I know I did email it to you, but it was a while ago, but the Crown of Life Ministries Church at 302 Southwest 8th Avenue, that was proposed for National Register listing, and at our National Register Review Board, which I sit on last week, we approved this to go forward to the federal government. So the feds have to make the final call, but
Right.
so far so good on
Yay.
that listing.
Okay. Next, that brings us to member comments. Anybody?
Yes. The city made a terrible decision in letting the CHW proposal for 10th Street and 2nd Avenue go forward. Very disappointing that the 5 that voted for it did so. There was, I only wish that the staff illustration showing that south elevation in relative scale to everything around it made it abundantly clear that their decision was totally inappropriate.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else?
I have a question about number of excused absences board members can have.
How about absences?
Ms. Kaufman?
I will have to get you that number from clerk's office, but there is a specific number.
Okay, I would love to see that. 'cause
Yeah,
I'm just-
actually, Bill has asked for that earlier, so I need to get that to you.
All right, Bill, you have asked for that.
Okay.
I mean, if we're gonna meet, we should have enough people to actually.
True.
Yeah, if we're gonna have members, the members need to show up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or if there's a way that alternate members could show for them. I don't even know if that's a possible.
Proxies are probably not in our board rules. All right, moving on. Anybody else with anything? Okay,
I have one comment, Mr. Chair, if I may, it'll be quick.
yes.
So I was doing some research for my employer, and I noticed something. Do you guys know the city of Leesburg has a grant to any developer who wants to restore any of the historic commercial buildings in their downtown? And, you know, they're a town of like 30, 40,000 people, and how is it that that little city is offering up to $250,000 towards any of those projects, but our city isn't? That's something I'd like to investigate.
Okay, I suggest you take that up.
Oh, I will. Don't you worry about it. I'll save all these old buildings while I'm at it too.
There you go. Go, Mikey.
Yeah.
Who's your employer again?
I'm not a privilege to say. Yeah.
I'll look into that.
Yeah, of course you will. Contractors, who needs them?
All right, next meeting's March 7th. And that brings us to an adjournment.